Hey guys, it's Kira and welcome to another video. Today we have a big mystery to solve, and that mystery is: how many Agatha Christie books can I read in 24 hours? That's right, it's time for a 24-hour readathon. Might I add, a very, very overdue 24-hour readathon, because it's been quite a while since I last did one and I fancied a challenge. I've had a couple of comments recently asking me to specifically take on an Agatha Christie 24-hour readathon, and as it just so happens, I have been intending to read Agatha Christie for quite some time. I've never picked up any of her books. My mum is a big fan of Miss Marple, but I've just never ended up reading any of them. So I've seen some of the TV adaptations, but I honestly couldn't recall exactly what happens aside from just knowing that they're all murder mysteries. So I'm very excited to get into these books, see how many I can read in 24 hours, because when you're reading an author for the very first time, what better way to introduce yourself to their works than by trying to read as many of their books as possible in one day? I think that's a great idea. So it's currently Friday evening. What's the date today? It's Friday the 18th of June, and I am going to be reading Agatha Christie books for the next 24 hours. It's currently about just after 4 p.m. and I'm planning to start my readathon at 5 p.m. So I've got a little bit of time to prepare myself for the mystery solving, and I think the way that I'm going to do that is by putting the kettle on and making myself a pot of tea, because I feel like Agatha Christie's books all feel very, you know, like classic British, often set in like big manor houses where there's lots of rich people and then a murder takes place. So instead of just making a mug of tea, I'm actually going to make myself a pot of tea, because that's two birds with one stone. I feel like I'm kind of fitting in with the aesthetic of the novels, but also I've created a good supply of hot drinks. And if you ask me, there's one thing you need when it comes to solving mysteries, it's a good supply of hot drinks. So with that in mind, I'm going to go put the kettle on and then get to solving some mysteries. I have quite a few of her books on my shelves, and I also have at least one audiobook downloaded, because I know that I'll be going to the gym and things like that at some point throughout the next 24 hours. So I want to make sure that I'm maximising my reading time, and if I manage to by some miracle get through all of these books, then I can obviously go into the bookshop in town and get some more from Waterstones. But for now, I think the one that I'm going to start with is probably the title that I maybe most associate with Agatha Christie and just was like on my radar as one that I definitely wanted to read, and that is Murder on the Orient Express. Don't know much about this aside from the fact that it takes place on a train, but I'm excited to find out. So cup of tea, book, mysteries, that's on the agenda. Let's see how many Agatha Christie books I can read in 24 hours. Let's let the mystery solving commence with Murder on the Orient Express. Okay, so it is about 6 o'clock, which means I'm an hour in, and I've read about 60 pages of Murder on the Orient Express so far, and I'm definitely enjoying it. But Jay just got home from work and he came bearing gifts, by which I mean a vegan pizza that I'm just about to cook in the oven. So I'm just going to take a little reading break and make dinner, but I'm very excited for the pizza, for the books, and just for an excellent Friday evening in general. Honestly, don't think it could get better than good books, good food, and a chilled out evening, especially because it is raining outside this evening and it just feels so cozy in here. But moving back onto the book in question, Murder on the Orient Express. I'm obviously very close to the beginning of this book, although it's not massive. I'm about, let's say, a third of the way through, but yeah, I'm definitely enjoying it. There's still a lot to be figured out and explored, but at this point in the novel the murder has just taken place, which means that the investigation has begun. This is one of Agatha Christie's Poirot novels, and I think most of her books fall into either being Poirot's or Miss Marple's, and I think there's a few other random outliers, but I've got a mixture of Miss Marple's and Poirot's to tackle over the next 24 hours. But I've started with this one and I'm definitely enjoying it a lot so far. It's really intriguing. There's definitely a lot going on. For the beginning of a book, it's quite busy. There are lots of characters, and of course that is totally intentional because you want to have lots of different people to be suspects in this mystery and lots of things to throw you off, put you on different paths, and just cause you into a state of disarray as you and Poirot try to figure out what's going on. So it's a lot to take in, a little bit different from the books that I usually read because I don't read a massive amount of murder mysteries, but I'm really excited to see where it goes. So that is where I'm up to with this book so far, and I just have one quote to share with you all which I thought was quite nice and set the scene for the story. So this is Poirot on the train with his friend, and they're having this little discussion, and his friend says, "It lends itself to romance, my friend. All around us are people of all classes, of all nationalities, of all ages. For 3 days these people, these strangers to one another, are brought together. They sleep and eat under one roof, they cannot get away from each other. At the end of 3 days they part, they go their several ways, never perhaps to see each other again." And then Poirot says, "And yet, suppose an accident. From your point of view it would be regrettable, I agree, but nevertheless, let us just for one moment suppose it. Then perhaps all these here are linked together by death." And it's obviously very morbid of Poirot to say, but I have to be honest, right? Obviously he is the investigator, the detective, and he isn't the one who committed the murder. But if I was on a train with someone and that guy said, what if all these people were brought together by death, and then but a few hours later someone was found dead on the train, I wouldn't be asking that person to solve it, I would be accusing them because that is suspicious. But anyway, enjoying this book so far. Gonna take a little break for dinner and then get back on the train. Wow, it is 10 to 9 in the evening and I am unbelievably tired, which I suppose is just a result of having had a full week at work. But plodding on I am, and I'm now on page 201 of Murder on the Orient Express. Now this book is split into 3 sections. The first section is called The Facts, the second section is called The Evidence, and then the third section is called Hercule Poirot Sits Back and Thinks. So essentially the first section is quite short and that just sets up the scene and introduces you to some of the characters and the crime happens. Then of course in the second section we have all of the evidence. Poirot interviews all of the people and tries to start to understand what he thinks is going on, obviously collecting evidence as he goes, and then finally he decides who's done it. So I have just gotten to the very first chapter of the final section, so I have heard all of the evidence, and let me be perfectly honest here, I have no idea what has happened. There's so much information, so many different people that could have a motive to commit the crime, but also so many solid alibis that I am looking at all of the characters trying to figure out who the hell has committed this crime, and I am clueless. Now I'm very interested. I think obviously this third section we're gonna see Poirot's kind of like method of figuring out who's done it, and I think that's going to give me a bit more of an insight into how Agatha Christie works. And I think that the more of her books I read, the more likely I will be to be able to guess who's committed the crime. But at this point I'm kind of like not noticing probably all of the hints and clues that she's giving us, which probably will make it really obvious by the end, but right now I have no idea. However, the fact that we have gotten to the end of the evidence, I kind of thought it would be fun to throw my ideas out there and just make a guess for who I think has committed the crime. But I want to be perfectly clear that I don't want to give any spoilers away in this vlog, because this is all about murder mysteries, and so even the slightest spoiler I think would just be pointless to give, because then it ruins it for anyone who hasn't read the books, and I think the surprise is obviously the most important part of a murder mystery. So in each of the books that I read, I'm very simply just going to be saying a name. I'm not going to be giving you any context, any information, or any just like guessing around why I've picked that person. I'm literally just going to say a name, not giving you any other information, and I'm also not going to be saying whether or not I was right or not at the end of the book, because again, that will be a massive spoiler. So essentially I'm just going to say a name and make a guess. If you have read the book that I'm talking about, or if you've seen a movie adaptation, then you'll know if I'm right or wrong or not, but if not, then it can just be a mystery until the day that you decide to read the book as well. So in the context of this book, and bear in mind, as I said, this is like literally a stab in the dark. Ironic. It's a stab in the dark because I have no idea. There's just so much confusion in my head, but I've narrowed it down to two people who I think, maybe, who knows, not me, but the two people I'm going for are Mr. McQueen and Mrs. Hubbard. So I'm going to be reading to find out, and I guess you will have to read to find out as well. So with that in mind, I'm going to make a cup of tea, pep myself up, and then tackle the last section of Murder on the Orient Express. Okay, so it is about 5 to 10 in the evening, and I just finished up with Murder on the Orient Express. So that is the first book of the Agatha Christie 24-hour readathon, done and dusted. Such an enjoyable reading experience, so much fun, and I'm so glad that I've enjoyed this one, because quite honestly, I was nervous going into a new author, not knowing if I was going to like the writing style, and having committed myself to 24 hours worth of this author's books. I'm so glad that the first one I picked up was a roaring success in terms of how much I enjoyed it. I would give this book at least 4 stars, and I'm very excited to at some point watch a movie adaptation, because I think it would be really, really fun to see this one brought to life, and I know that there's a lot of different adaptations of this particular one. But going back to my thoughts on the book, so much was going on. I was making all kinds of guesses, but I am so amateur, and all the way through I've just been trying to like put pieces together, make various guesses, try to think like a detective, but it's really difficult, and I feel like Agatha Christie really keeps you on your toes until the last page, or at least that has been my experience with this book, and I'm very much thinking that that's going to be the case with all of her books, because she's kind of famous for writing these kinds of books. Don't know if you know that, but yeah, it was very like, there's so much going on, so many characters, so much to think about, and it was really, really intense, but really, really fun. And I obviously am not a detective, but there are lots of characters in this book who are not detectives, and in fact there is only one detective. So although as the reader I felt like I was out of my depth in terms of trying to figure things out, there were some characters who made me feel a little bit more at ease. So Poirot had a friend on the train, and at the beginning of part 3, which is where Poirot starts trying to put all of the evidence together and figure out what he thinks has happened, his friend is feeling very disheartened, and he basically says, "If you solve this case, I shall indeed believe in miracles. It worries me, I cannot make head nor tail of it. To be frank, I cannot see what you are going to do next." And so this character was feeling just as lost as I was and had no idea how we were going to get it solved. And yeah, it really is such a page turner, which is obviously what you want, especially in a 24-hour readathon, and I really did enjoy this one. So very glad to have finally read this one, because I bought this particular copy back in December of 2020, because I also bought my mum a like fancy blue and gold copy of it for Christmas, because like I said, she is a big fan of Agatha Christie's things, and it was a beautiful copy, but I thought I'd buy one for myself, and it's now over 6 months later and I've only just gotten around to reading it, but I'm very glad that I did and that I enjoyed it. So book 1 is down, done and dusted, we're on the move, and it's now about 10 p.m. And normally on a 24-hour readathon I would try and push myself to stay awake a little bit longer, like more towards midnight, but a little bit different this time around, because we actually have to get up at about 5:30 in the morning, because Jay is going to be going to work, so we need to get up, go to the gym, get back and all of that kind of stuff. So we're getting up very early, and I value my sleep. I know it's a 24-hour readathon, but a gal's got to sleep. So I'm actually going to head to bed very shortly, and then in the morning heading straight to the gym, and that is where I'm going to crack out an audiobook. So I have downloaded the audiobook on script of The Body in the Library is what I've gone for. So that's what I'm going to be listening to tomorrow. It is 5 hours and 40 minutes, and I'm probably going to put it on like 1.5, maybe 2 speed, depending on what the narrator is like, and try and listen to that one whilst I'm at the gym tomorrow morning, and just like doing a few other bits and pieces. So that's on the agenda, but right now, time for some sleep, and then I will get back to reading and mystery solving in the morning. Guys, it is just before 8 a.m. on Saturday morning, and the 24-hour readathon is plodding onwards. I just got back from the gym. We set off and got to the gym at about 6:30 this morning, and whilst I was there I listened to the audiobook of The Body in the Library. So I'm currently on chapter 9 out of 21, so I'm just under halfway through this audiobook, and so far I am really enjoying it. And I'm also so glad that I decided to download an audiobook, because normally in a 24-hour readathon where I would just be physically reading books, it means that you can't continue reading when you're doing all of the other jobs that you kind of have to do. And so at the gym it would feel like an hour wasted, whereas this time I could work out and also continue reading. So that was a great feeling. But moving back onto the book, I'm really enjoying it. Now, comparing this one to Murder on the Orient Express that I obviously read last night, I feel like they are definitely different styles of Agatha Christie novels. and that potentially might be because Murder on the Orient Express was a Poirot, whereas The Body in the Library is a Miss Marple novel, and I feel like there's definitely like a different style of the two. And I'd say that The Body in the Library, so the Miss Marple, is kind of fitting more into the vibe and style that I had expected from Agatha Christie, and I think that that's just because, as I mentioned yesterday, my mum is a big fan of Miss Marple TV adaptations, and I don't think she watches quite as many Poirot ones, so I feel like I just have this image and connection between Agatha Christie and Miss Marple, which are the ones that are kind of more set in big country houses with like rich people and a murder has happened and all of that kind of stuff. So I've really enjoyed both so far, but it's just interesting to notice that like difference in style when it comes to the two different detectives that she writes. Now, although this is a Miss Marple, it's a little bit unusual, and it's only the second Miss Marple book. According to Goodreads, it's Miss Marple number 2. So I feel like maybe the character hadn't been like fully established yet, but essentially we start in the house of the Bantries, a husband and wife who are very rich. They've got servants and all kinds of things, and Mrs. Bantry is woken up by one of her maids basically telling her that a body has been found in the library, hence the title, The Body in the Library. Now, in the village that they live in, that is where Miss Marple also lives, and Miss Marple is friends with Mrs. Bantry, and so Mrs. Bantry calls Miss Marple and says, look, I think you're really good at this kind of thing, so will you come up and see whether you can figure it out? But then the police are also called, so we kind of have two simultaneous investigations going on where the actual police are going and trying to figure out what's happening, and then we also have Miss Marple in the house kind of being pulled into this investigation kind of against her will. So it's not necessarily what I was expecting in that sense, because I kind of thought that Miss Marple would just come in, take control of the investigation, kind of like Poirot did on Murder on the Orient Express, but I'm very much enjoying it. There's lots of different angles, lots of different characters, and much like Murder on the Orient Express, there's lots going on and I have no idea who did the crime. Now, what is different about this book, and I'm interested to see whether this is like a common theme in her novels, is that unlike the Murder on the Orient Express, we knew exactly who the victim was. In this book we have several like overlaying mysteries because the actual body is a mystery in and of itself. We don't actually know who it is or how that person came to be in the library, and then of course once that mystery has been solved, then the mystery of actually who committed the murder then has to be addressed. So it's kind of like even more layers to unpick, and I'm really enjoying it. So I had originally planned to just listen to this audiobook while I was at the gym, and maybe if I went out on a walk or something later on, and then when I got home from the gym I was planning to start another physical book. However, I feel like given that I am very much an amateur detective in this situation, picking up another one and listening to one book simultaneously whilst reading another one physically will just confuse me, and I will get all kinds of jumbled up about what's going on. So I'm currently listening on 2x speed because it's quite like a slow narrator, so 2x speed seems like a reasonable way to listen to this one. So I'm thinking I'm gonna go make some breakfast, have a drink, enjoy a little bit of a chilled out morning whilst listening to the audiobook whilst doing a few household tasks, and then once I've finished The Body in the Library, then I'm going to be making a start on my next physical book, which I think is going to be And Then There Were None. So that's the plan of action. Very much enjoying the book so far, and I'll catch up with you later with hopefully some more information. Okay, so it is now 10 AM and I am 2 books down because I just finished up listening to The Body in the Library, which I loved and decided to rate 5 stars because it was just such a fun and captivating reading experience. Not to mention how helpful it was to have listened to that one on audiobook because I got to go to the gym, I also did my makeup, had breakfast, got dressed, all the while still reading and being productive. So that was really nice, and I'm so glad that I picked such a good one to listen to on audio. I feel like this one in particular had such a good balance between the like more gruesome, serious murder mystery elements and then also some more like comedic, amateur sleuth, just like funny bits. And I really feel like potentially, I don't know if I'm completely alone in this, but I feel like for the crime genre, Agatha Christie is kind of like what Jane Austen is to like classic romance novels, because there are obviously serious themes, critiques of society, all of that kind of stuff, but there's always an undertone of like comedy within it, and I just really like that. So the main character, well, I suppose there isn't really a main character as such, but the couple whose house this murder takes place in, the Bantries, the wife of this couple is really relishing in the fact that she knows she's innocent, she thinks her husband is innocent, and so she's like, well, I don't know who this girl is, I don't have any personal attachment to her, so I'm just going to enjoy it. And there's a quote later on which I've made a note of because I just thought it was so funny, and she's talking to Miss Marple, who's called Jane, and she says, but it's my murder, Jane, and I want to enjoy myself over it. And I just feel like that is so hilarious and just shows how like removed and out of context she is from the severity of what's going on. So safe to say that I really did enjoy that one. And now straight away onto the next one, because that's how 24-hour readathons work. So like I mentioned, I'm going to be picking up And Then There Were None, which I don't know if this is a Poirot or a Marple or just a general murder mystery. I don't know if there's like a specific detective for this one, but I'm very excited to dive in and find out. This one is about 250 pages long, so I think the shortest one that I've picked up today, and I'm very excited to dive in, see what happens. I think Jay went on Goodreads to see like the ratings of all of the books that I was planning to pick up over the next 24 hours, and of all of the ones that I had on my shelves, And Then There Were None was the highest rated. So I've got high expectations, gonna make another cup of tea and then get straight into it. It is now 12 p.m, which means that there are 5 hours left of reading in the 24-hour readathon, and I just finished up with And Then There Were None. I absolutely devoured this story because it was so intense and full of action. Like there was literally someone dropping dead every other page, or at least that's how it felt. It was so messy and complicated, and I also felt very at home in this novel, by which I mean this was in fact a book that didn't have a detective. So basically the premise for this story is that a group of 10 strangers are invited to this island, and they all think it's from someone that they know, and then when they get there things start to get a little bit suspicious and they're all accused of having committed various crimes. And so they all start to feel very nervous. They want to leave this island immediately, but there seems to be no escape. And then gradually, one by one, they start dying and assume that one of the people within the group of 10 was the person that invited them there and is trying to kill them all off. And so there's no detectives, there's no way for them to reach the outside world, to contact the police, and so they're kind of left with this mystery, trying to figure out who is killing all of these people, whilst also trying to keep themselves alive, and everyone starts to get a little bit unhinged, and there's a lot going on. So it was really, really intense, super, super fast paced, so much going on, and I loved it. Definitely another 5-star read. I can see why this one is so highly ranked, because you really are just thrown into the mystery and there's no guiding detective presence like Poirot or Marple kind of like leading you on the right path. Like, you are just thrown into the mix and it is so crazy to figure out what's going on. I'd say this one felt quite similar to Lucy Foley's 2 books, which are The Hunting Party and then more specifically The Guest List, which is all about a wedding that takes place on a remote island on like a stormy day, and a death happens there and then everyone is thrown into suspicion. So it felt very similar to those 2 books, which I absolutely loved. So I felt like I was going to enjoy this one when that kind of premise was kind of put out there. And then I also thought that it had a bit of a similarity to the Saw horror movies, because they kind of had this vibe of people just being randomly put together and punished for something that they don't really know what for. And then there's like, what's the guy called? I can't remember what the guy is that brings them all there in Saw. You know the guy, the one with the weird face, like the mask thing. But basically, Jigsaw brings them all there and like is this overriding morality figure whilst also doing something that's completely immoral, and that felt very similar to this as well. So really enjoyed this one. It's 12 o'clock, so I've got 5 hours, which in normal time would 100% be enough time to read another book, but I'm going to be up against it because I decided to make plans today. I'm actually just about to head into town to go and meet Em and Sarah for a coffee, which means that at least 1 or 2 of those hours will be taken up by not reading. So the next book that I'm going to be picking up is Nemesis, which I think is a Marple book. Yes, it is. This is a Marple one. And I'm very excited to get back into that because I obviously really enjoyed the last Marple one, and I feel like this one maybe will be a little bit more established because, like I said, the Body in the Library was the second ever Miss Marple one, so she wasn't really like a fully established or like admired detective yet. She was still finding her footing and getting that like reverence that people have for people like her and Poirot in their like later novels, and I feel like this one will probably be a bit more like that. So this one has just under 300 pages. So my plan of action is actually to head into town immediately. I might get into town a little bit early. I've downloaded the audiobook for Nemesis so that I can listen to it on my walk into town. If I get there before Em and Sarah, I'll start doing some physical reading, and then I'm going to aim to be home by no later than 2:30 so that I'll have a good couple of hours to try and finish this book before 5 o'clock. So with all that said, I have a lot to do. Let's get to it. Home from town. It is 3:15 in the afternoon, so I've got just under 2 hours now left of the readathon, and I'm actually very much looking forward to a couple of hours of uninterrupted peaceful reading with a lovely cup of tea, because it was very nice to catch up with Em and Sarah in town. It's obviously always nice to meet up with friends and family and, you know, catch up over coffee and all of that fun stuff, but town was unbelievably busy. It was so hectic and a little bit overwhelming. There were so many people. It was like whoa. I think obviously York in general, if anyone's ever been, will know that it's a very, very busy like tourist hotspot. The city itself is quite small and then lots of people come, so it ends up being very, very crowded. And then add into that the fact that lots of businesses that have obviously been closed for ages have now reopened. I think that means even more people have come in, so basically it is out of control busy. So went for coffee with Em and Sarah, and I'm very excited now to be home and back in a peaceful, quiet environment with no people around, because there were just far too many people for my liking outside today. I was not a fan. But onto the reading. I did do some reading whilst I was out and about, and actually ended up finding a nice quiet part of town, well, relatively quiet compared to the rest of it. I found myself a little bench and I did some reading whilst I was waiting for Sarah to arrive. And then when she turned up, it turns out that she was also reading a thriller. I think she was reading The Dinner Guests, which looks really good. I'm very excited to try and read that at some point. But essentially, we both just decided to do some reading outside and enjoy the afternoon sun. It's been a bit of a weird weather day. Yesterday was so rainy. Today has been rainy, grey, windy, cloudy and sunny, but we caught a little bit of sun outside, did some reading, and between reading in the garden and then listening to the audiobook on my walk to and from town, I have made it to page 175 of Nemesis, which is the start of chapter 15, and this book has just under 300 pages. So I've essentially got like 115 pages left of this book. Have to be honest, of the books that I've read so far today, I think Nemesis is probably going to be my least favourite because it's a little bit different. Now, it's obviously still a murder mystery, it's still a detective story, but all of the other ones have been like a very in the moment whodunit, like a body has been found and then it's like putting the pieces together, interrogating people in the moment. I just feel like it's been very fun to read those like really intense, sudden murder mysteries and you get a resolution very quickly. Whereas in Nemesis, Miss Marple is contacted posthumously by a friend who has just passed away. This friend is also a detective, and this guy basically sends her a letter that she receives after he dies, asking her to continue the work that he was doing in trying to solve a cold case. This is a murder that he thinks was wrongly solved, and he thinks the wrong person was accused of the crime and is in prison for it, and he wants Miss Marple to try and put that right. So instead of having like a situation where you know exactly what the crime is and exactly what the circumstances are and you're interviewing people, finding the body and all of that in a very like quick period of time, it's definitely a little bit more vague as she tries to uncover exactly what the mystery is and then do the detective work to try and figure out how to solve the mystery. So I feel like I just feel a little bit more removed from the drama of this murder because it's like not happening in real time, if that makes sense, and I think there's a lot more to uncover and therefore there's quite a lot of different layers, and I'm just finding it a little bit less captivating. Nevertheless, it's not a terrible book or anything. I just think that the other 3 books that I've read so far have been so good that this one just isn't quite living up to that experience. But gonna be reading this one now for the next couple of hours. I think I have saved myself enough time left in my afternoon to finish this one just in time for the end of the readathon. So without further ado, let's do some reading. esteemed colleagues, we were set the task of trying to solve the mystery of how many Agatha Christie books I could read in 24 hours. And I think I've solved the mystery because it is currently 4:33 p.m. I started this readathon at 5 p.m. yesterday afternoon, and I just finished up my read of Nemesis. And I think this will have to be the final book that I tackle in this readathon because I don't think even the best detective in the world could solve a whole mystery in 27 minutes. So with that said, the answer to the mystery we set to trying to solve, how many Agatha Christie books I could read in 24 hours, is 4. I completed Murder on the Orient Express, The Body in the Library, and Then There Were None, and finally Nemesis. So before we jump into my final thoughts, let's talk a little bit more about Nemesis, the book that I just finished. I think that I may have been slightly harsh in my earlier analysis of this book. I still stand by the fact that I think this is probably my least favourite, and I'll get into a little ranking of all of the books in just a moment. But I do think that the second half of this book really pulled it back into the realm of Agatha Christie that I had been really enjoying, because I think that there was a lot more setup for this because it was a cold case. There had to be a lot more analysis, and I guess Miss Marple had to work a lot harder to get her evidence because it wasn't just right in front of her, as would have been the case if she'd have just simply found a body and been called to this mystery. So I think the setup section of the book, which exists in all of them, was just a lot larger in this one, and I didn't enjoy that quite as much. I like it when you start seeing all of the facts come together, and so that really did kick off in the last like 100 or so pages. So basically what I read when I got back from town, and it was really good. I really was taken by surprise by this one. Another mystery that has been solved though in the last 24 hours is the mystery of whether or not I should be a detective, and I think to that one it's a resounding no, because I, at the beginning of this readathon, and as you saw in Murder on the Orient Express, was going to try and make little guesses for each of the novels, but I gave up after that first one because, quite frankly, that one was the biggest just like guess of all time, and I was reading the other books and just, I had no idea, nothing was coming to me, and I just could not figure out how to be a detective. So maybe that's something that will come with time and reading more Agatha Christie books, but right now I just decided to give up on guessing and just enjoy the ride because I could not for the life of me try and figure it out and put all of the pieces together. So 4 books down, I had an excellent time. I would normally give a page total at the end of a 24-hour readathon, but I read 3 books physically and then also listened to an audiobook, so I know exactly how many pages are in these ones, and then I've just had to go off of Goodreads and what they say was the page total in The Body in the Library, but that brings us up to a total of 1,012 pages read in the last 24 hours, and lots of mysteries having been solved, so it's been a really fun time. Finally, I would just like to rank all of the books. I'd love to know whether you can guess my ranking of them based on what I've said, and obviously you might have seen what I've rated them. But starting in the lowest place, we have Nemesis. For all the reasons I just explained, the last half of the book really great, but definitely didn't pull me in and entice me as much as the other books. Then I would have to say Murder on the Orient Express. This one was very closely tied with my second place, like third and second were really interchangeable because both of the books were, I'd say, the 2 that were most similar in their style, and I just really liked them. They were classic murder mysteries with detectives, and I absolutely loved it. So I had to say Murder on the Orient Express went in third, and then in second we had my audiobook, which was The Body in the Library. I think I just liked that slightly more than Murder on the Orient Express because it had a little bit more comedy and just like classic cozy countryside vibes, but very similar. So that is in second place, and that leaves in first place And Then There Were None, which I just thought was so much fun. It would have been impossible for me to make any guesses on this one because there was so much going on and I was just so invested in finding out what was happening. But yeah, loved it. So I think it's safe to say after the last 24 hours that I am now a big fan of Agatha Christie. Can't believe I've never read her books before, but I certainly will be reading more of her books going forward. If you have any Agatha Christie books that you think I should read, then please do send me your recommendations in the comments, because there's a lot to read. And I'm also very happy to say that I think I'm going to be doing another Agatha Christie 24-hour readathon in the future, because quite frankly she has enough books for me to do many 24-hour readathons. So if you'd like to see me do another one, again, just let me know in the comments, because I could definitely sort that out for you guys. We can solve some more mysteries together. So thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed hearing my thoughts on my first ever Agatha Christie experience. Love to know if you've read any Agatha Christie books, if you like her, if you like any other murder mysteries, and all of that fun stuff. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.